Hello, everyone, and welcome to Episode 3 of the Bump and Run podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chaffe. Joining me today is Andrew Wisdom and our two newest members, Jay Cook and Gary Owen, who you might also know from the Gary Owen YouTube channel. So, guys, Atlanta has come and gone. We have seen that was a good plug-in. We have seen 75% of the package this weekend, and want to know you guys' thoughts. A lot of headlines as well. Obviously, the package is the big one, but no doubt, or I called you no doubt. Andrew, we will start with you. What are your thoughts on Atlanta?
Well, other than the weird broadcast, I thought it was a good race. I think we had a total of 26 lead changes, even though it didn't really seem like that much once we kind of got going green, but probably just because of the restarts, because the restarts were just absolutely bonkers. It was good to see Kyle Larson and Kevin Harvick out front. Obviously, we're kind of used to seeing Harvick out front, but it was good to see Larson up there challenging him, especially as weak as the Chevys have been for the last year. So I don't know. I think the higher cornering speed kind of helped them a lot at Atlanta, because you didn't really have to have every single car stuck to the very bottom of the track while watching Harvick pull away from everybody for 50 laps. There were multiple lines, multiple grooves that were working throughout the race. People were able to pass each other, especially in the midfield, and I just thought it was a lot of good action all around compared to years past.
Now we'll save Jay here after Gary for certain reasons. Gary, your thoughts on Atlanta?
I thought it was a great race. There's a lot of passing up front, multiple different leaders, which you usually don't see. You usually have a guy like Kevin Harvick dominate the whole thing, versus we had Larson up front, Harvick at times, Truex, and even Almirola until he fell off. And the midfield was probably the best racing I've seen at a mile and a half since I've started watching. I mean, you saw how grouped up they were, probably the closest I've ever seen the midfield running together. And there's a lot less passes in the past years, but I feel like just the close quarters racing really made it an exciting race compared to what we've had in the past, especially at Atlanta. But yeah, I thought it was a much better race than what we've seen in the past.
Now I saved Jay for third because, Jay, you were there at Atlanta, and obviously from experience being to a racetrack myself, the product you see when you're there at the track is completely different than when you're watching on TV. But I would have to think, especially with the new package, it had to have felt different being there at the track. So how did you see the race? What was it like?
Oh yeah, it was a lot different. The first thing that I noticed is before at Atlanta, the noise was a lot different. Before, you would go there and you would have to have some kind of ear protection on, but now since they're doing 20 mile an hour or less, the noise was a lot less ridiculous. And so I feel like that could also be a kind of attraction for some fans, because they won't go deaf going to a race now.
Yeah.
But the overall racing in general was much better than I've seen. They may not have made as many passes before, but it wasn't as strung out. They were still there was there was racing for positions in mid pack, and even up front you would see somebody come from a couple seconds back and make a challenge for the lead. And so it was just generally more exciting than I think in past years. But they could still work on making passes a little bit easier. But I think in order to have good racing, you don't have to have passes every 30 seconds. If they're racing for the pass, if they're racing for position, then I think that's what counts.
We'll definitely bring that up. Yeah, my point of view of Atlanta was, I mentioned this throughout I mentioned this on Instagram, because I do like Stewart-Haas racing updates, but I made one Instagram story post, and I think it was around like 40 laps through stage 1, and I posted as saying, what I'm witnessing is weird. Like, I can't make a decision on if I like it or not. And I even said I don't think I can make a true statement on this package until like 3 or 4 more races go by. But what I was thinking there in the moment was, I was really surprised by these restarts and how crazy they got. And I was also surprised by runs people would get. One of the big examples were a lot of the lead battles. What would happen is a car would get to the leader. They'd work their way up to the leader, and something would happen. Whether they get into the draft of that lead car, they lose the car in some way, they fall off. but instead of losing more time, they wound up like the following lap they would run a different line or get so much more momentum, and they wound up like passing the leader. We saw that between Kyle Larson and Kevin Harvick, and I think anyone else out there who was in the lead, and that goes for any battle on track. I noticed that one person passed, it took a while for both of them to really spread apart. Like, it seemed like both cars had really good speed and momentum and handling to be able to gain back on that driver and try to retake them. So it was really cool. And there was even a moment too where you had, I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how it was at the track. I don't know if like fans were going crazy, whether or not there were a lot of lead changes, but I know there was a moment where Kyle Larson was leading, you had Kyle Busch in second, and then you had Truex challenging for the lead. And this was like in middle of a green flag run. Usually Atlanta, we see the leader just pull away. So keeping that in mind, what do you guys think about, like, does this package really give you like a second chance? Like, is it a good package to really try to regain positions back, you know, if you do fall off? No doubt, why don't you start with that? I called you No Doubt again, Andrew.
I was gonna say, I think it depends on the I think it depends on the driver. That's kind of the main thing that I noticed with the package, and I'm assuming it'll probably stay the same way, or at least be similar even with the tracks that have the aero ducts on. But the package now seems like it punishes any sort of inconsistency that the drivers are going to have. You tap the apron, you get loose, whatever, get stalled behind a lap car, it's going to take you multiple laps to get that momentum back. So I think overall it's going to produce better racing. I think that you can gain that momentum back, and you basically, it's kind of just a waiting game, I think, at that point, unless your car is just genuinely faster, which didn't really seem to be the case at Atlanta, as much as just people would recoup and wait for the person that was in front of them to make their own mistake. I enjoyed the fact that it punishes the inconsistency, but I think that it's just keeping that momentum up, and you can't make a single mistake.
I want to brush on Gary and Jay. You guys have anything to add to that?
Well.
Yeah, I noticed that. Oh, sorry, Gary.
I was going to say I agree with No Doubt.
Good enough.
Okay.
We all agree with No Doubt. Let's move on.
All
Jay,
right.
go on. What were you going to say?
I noticed that it seemed a lot harder to gain the time that you either lost or, you know, had, and then you would make a mistake and then somebody would easily gain up on you. So the times are so consistent with, you know, even with the tire fall off and all that, that if you made a mistake, like No Doubt said, it was going to punish you. The person behind you was probably going to catch you and be able to pass you within a few laps. And then if you were trying to catch somebody else and you made a mistake, then you weren't, you know, it was going to take a lot more to get to them. And it punished inconsistency and rewarded drivers who could, you know, keep everything together and run every lap perfect.
It definitely showed.
You saw that with Larson, too.
Mm-hmm.
When, you know, Larson, he was leading, and I don't know, he had probably had like half a second to lead on Harvick at the time, and he got just a little bit loose and held on, but it completely destroyed his momentum, and Harvick just drove right up to him and got by him.
There was that one time that Jimmy Johnson slid up in front of him. Jimmy Johnson slid up in front of Larson and lost him over 8/10.
Oh, yeah.
Just on the backstretch.
And you can gain a lot of time and lose a lot of time with this package. I mean, there was a moment, I think, where Paul Menard was bump drafting someone down the backstretch at Atlanta. So if you use it correctly, you can get big runs, and but if you don't use it correctly, you do lose a lot of time. I kind of, looking at this package, I kind of think of it as when we had restrictor plates on the cars for super speedways, where if you let off the throttle and then got back on, it takes a while for the engine to, you know, build up revs again. I feel like that's kind of what this package does, is that you have to stay in the throttle. You have to find that speed somehow and in some way. And if you fail to do that, it's going to take a while to get that momentum. I mean, it's clear that you can build momentum over time. It's regainable, but if you lose it, you lose a ton of it. And it does set you back a lot. And that was one of the big points. A lot of people were concerned whether or not we would see full throttle racing throughout the race. And I was surprised when they were like 35, 40, 45, 50 laps into the run where they were letting off the throttle, but they were also dragging the brakes, which I found really surprising. I did not once think with this package that we'd see guys dragging the brakes, but apparently they are running way faster in the corners than they had seen at Atlanta previously. I think I heard something like drivers had used to slow down maybe 150, 140 through the corners. I think maybe the lowest would be 130. And these guys this weekend were doing a good 160, I think. I don't know what the actual speeds were, if you guys can back me up on that.
I think the fastest was 175, and then the drop.
Yeah, I think it was right around
low
there.
160s.
Okay.
As the tires were.
Still incredibly fast. I mean, now the straightaways, they're probably not doing much. I mean, even visually, it got to a point for me where I'm like, wow, this is slow. But you don't see it in the corners. It's not visible in the corners whatsoever. Matt O'Brien, who was in episode 2, last week's episode of the Bump and Run podcast, he said that this year's Atlanta race was only 1 minute longer than last year's Atlanta race. And last year's Atlanta race
the same number of
also had the same number of cautions. Same number of laps, same number of cautions. We can all agree that even though this is a slower car, lower horsepower, they're carrying enough speed to the corners where it's not really slowing the race down at all. For whatever reason, I felt like it was going to go by really long. Obviously, it didn't. Jay, from your perspective, did it feel like the race went longer than it usually is?
No, not really. Through the middle of the stages, it kind of felt like it was taking a while to get through the stage. Like, I noticed by the time they got to the end of stage 2, I'm sitting there looking at my watch going, holy crap, it's only been 2 hours. It honestly felt like it had been a lot longer than that. Mm-hmm. So to the middle, towards the end of the stages, it kind of got a little bit long, mainly because they had long green flag runs in the stages. Really, there wasn't that many cautions. So no, not really, but yeah.
Because like I said, I know like when they're going on the straightaways, it felt so slow. I thought, I even told my dad at one point when I got up, I was like, I'm pretty sure they're going to be here till 7 o'clock to do this race. I didn't believe it was going to end, at the time it did. Let's talk about this package and stronger teams versus underfunded teams. Because a lot of people heading into this weekend thought that this package would be an excellent package to try to mix the field up, to equal out the competition. Did we see that? Gary, we'll start with you, whether or not you think we saw that this weekend.
Well, it certainly looked like you still saw the top teams prevail, and you certainly saw that the lower underfunded teams still struggled pretty heavily, except for maybe a few teams that you don't usually see run very well, like JTG. They had a surprise run. I think they had both cars in the top 10 until Priest had his situation. And then you saw RCR at times have a glimpse of hope where you had Hamrick up in the top 10, which I really didn't expect from that team. So I still think that maybe it's a little too early to tell. I think next week we're going to have, the full package, and you'll really be able to tell if the lower teams are going to have a chance. But from what I saw in Atlanta, it seems like it's still pretty normal to what we have had. Like, the lower teams still seem to at least struggle quite a bit on battling the top teams.
To add on to what you said, I don't know if we covered this last week, Andrew, if we talked about whether or not we're getting the full package or not. Atlanta was not the full package. When I mentioned in the beginning we're running 75% of what the full package is, they did not have aero ducts. And the reasoning behind that was because guys at Atlanta like to drag the brakes, and it kind of makes sense for a track like Atlanta, very worn out and slick, so I'd expect drivers to use the brakes, which makes sense. So we'll talk about that later maybe, but we'll definitely see going into Las Vegas, whether or not the aero ducts on the car will have that big of an effect compared to no aero ducts like Atlanta. But to continue on with the stronger teams versus underfunded, Andrew, your thoughts on that?
I'm going to be hateful for a second here.
That's fine.
You probably make some enemies. You look at RCR, it's a miracle what can happen when you put a good driver in the car. Daniel Hemrick, we'll back up. We had Austin Dillon on the radio complaining about the car the entire race, running in like low 20s, mid 20s, kind of trying to crack into the teens on positions, unhappy with the car, unhappy apparently with the entire body of the Chevrolet. But then you have Daniel Hemrick in his rookie season up inside the top 10. I think the driver can make a difference, but I do think, when you think about it, Austin Dillon, to be fair to him, this package is so much different than obviously it has been in the Cup cars in the last few years. The Cup cars had very little downforce last year compared to what they have now. If you have Hemrick, who just came out of Xfinity, and the cars that have a little, a good amount of downforce, a little less power, and you have more time on the throttle, it really could just be kind of another step in the general direction where he was heading driving those cars. But I think it was really good to see JTG up there. I think Ryan Preece turned a lot of heads after his performance at Daytona, or at least with his wreck avoidance at Daytona. It's unfortunate that
not in Atlanta.
The Rick Ware car got in the way on pit road a little bit there. Yeah, they might need to have some drivers meetings internally during the week. But
road practice.
Yeah, pit road practice, at least under green. But I think it was good to see a shakeup. I hate to see it for teams like Hendrick that struggled basically the entire race. Hate to see Penske, who ran good the entire race and had all three drivers lead laps, lose it at the end because of the tire problems. But I think that the field is a lot closer overall. I mean, you had I think you had Roush inside the top 10 at one point. I don't remember if Newman finished
was doing
inside
really
the top
good.
10.
I don't recall, but I'm pretty sure he at least finished in top 15. And I know
I believe he finished in the top 10.
Maybe he did. I know Stenhouse for a fact was able to work his way back up to like the top 15 as well.
Yeah, so it was good to see that. It was good to see some of kind of the older teams that maybe kind of fell off in the last couple of years also kind of make a little bit of a return to glory, or at least become a little bit more competitive in the new package. But I am still kind of curious after Atlanta, once again being kind of a biased Hendrick fan, what is truly going on with the Chevys, because it seemed like Ganassi is still pretty much the only team that really has it figured out on the mile and a half, even with the new package. So curious to see how that works out over the course of the season.
To finish off our Atlanta headlines, not to be rude, Jay, but I think we can all agree
that I get a pretty good point.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that it doesn't matter what package you're going to be given. Teams that have the resources, who have the employees, who build fast cars, no matter what the regulations are, they're going to be out there in front. Although in this case, it seemed like it was unpredictable, though. It wasn't one guy like Kevin Harvick who was out there in the lead. It was a toss-up of drivers up there. So the higher-end teams, even though one car may not have gotten all the way out, they were all kind of competing against each other. And yeah, like you said, like it was cool to see the 42 up there. Obviously Chip Ganassi has it figured out. Penske's still up there. Haas, strong performance by them again. Obviously because I followed them, I knew about it, but it's another top 10 finish for them at Atlanta. They did the same thing last season, and SHR went on to have a very successful 2018. So I could see the same with Penske. Penske was the same thing too. Yet Ryan Blaney, I don't think we talked about Ryan Blaney yet. Ryan Blaney led some laps. And that was really cool to see. Him get out there.
Good chunk.
Really strong performance by Penske. I mean, I think the package, if it doesn't please the fans on close racing, it's giving top teams a chance to compete with each other, instead of just running around, with one guy going away with the lead, and then you're just kind of stuck in like 5th or 6th and have nowhere to go. With this package, you at least have a chance to kind of get around them, make runs, get up there.
I think with this package, to contradict what Kyle Busch said, I think with this package, the driver and crew chief are probably going to matter more than anything. Because to go back again to the close times and not making mistakes and all that kind of stuff, if your crew chief can get your car set up right, if the driver knows what to tell the crew chief, if the driver knows not how to make mistakes, then that's going to be the person who prevails. So I feel like that's the way it's going to be with this package: is the least mistakes, the best setup, all that kind of stuff. Not just build a fast car.
it's going to go to something we're going to talk about later, but it's a lot of strategy too. You have to play the right strategy. You have to, I mean, like, you know, NASCAR advertises this. It's a high-speed chess match. And I completely agree with them. You have to make the smartest moves quickly. And if you're unable to do that, if you're unable to carry out those quick moves and the right moves and the smartest moves, you're not going to be out there leading by the end of the day. You'll know that you've messed up and done something wrong. To move on to whether or not the package worked. Again, obviously I understand why people say maybe there wasn't enough pack racing. Maybe there wasn't enough side-by-side racing. But this package was very unique in how it was set up and what we saw at Atlanta. And I think the racing improved. I mean, from the start of the race to the end of the race, I had no idea who was going to win that race. And I think that was the biggest key factor into my backing as to why the package was good. It was up in the air. You know, it was really exciting to see who would play the right strategy. You know, even on track, you know, who would have the best handling car, who would be able to make those runs. I mean, you saw like Larson, he got loose a couple of times. Harvick got loose a couple of times. There's other drivers out in the field who were still struggling for handling. Even though these cars are way slower and have a ton of downforce, they were still struggling. And it was just exciting to see. I didn't know, even from the stage 1 and stage 2 results, I had no idea that Brad Keselowski was going to go out there and win the race. I had no idea that Truex would be there in contention to try to get the win. And I think that's what makes this package good. Again, the full package isn't in because we don't have the aero ducts. They could definitely change how the racing works, but to get our feet wet into the package, I think it was good. But you know, we won't know. We won't know until the package goes to other tracks like Las Vegas, like Auto Club, like Phoenix, like Texas, like Charlotte. We will not know until we see it go there. Heck, even Daytona and Talladega, because technically this package is going there. We're not running those super speedway packages anymore. So even then, we might see a different style of racing there for super speedways. Jay, we'll start with you. You agree, disagree? You like the package so far?
Yeah, I agree. The package so far seems to create closer racing than we had before. It still gets spread out, but again, you know, full package isn't in yet. We'll have to wait till Las Vegas and tracks afterwards to see how it works and teams figure it out and all that kind of stuff to see what happens. So I think, you know, even after Vegas and the West Coast swing, we may not know how the package is going to work just because teams haven't figured it out yet. So what we may have now may be different when we get towards, you know, later in the year at Kansas and Kentucky and all those type of races. So for now, like it. In the middle of the season, don't know if my opinion is going to change or not, but for now, yes, I like the package.
I also certainly really like the package. I mean, for the first time in quite some time, at a mile and a half, we had, you know, the midfield had really, at times, intense racing. They were all grouped up in quite close quarters racing, and I can't really think of the last time at a mile and a half where I saw 4 or 5 drivers lead for a good group of laps. You saw Larson, he led over 100 laps. Almirola, I think he led about the first 30 or so. You might know that, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
And then you saw Blaney get up front, and he led for 30 or so laps. Keselowski obviously led like the last 50 in Harvick. So, I mean, I can't think of another time at a mile and a half where I've seen that many drivers lead a good group of laps. It's usually someone just running away with it. Maybe a second guy will get up there and do something, but and we had this smallest margin of victory at Atlanta in the past 5 years, which was really cool to see. And I think that the package is going in the right direction, but like I said earlier, it's a little maybe too early to judge since we haven't seen the full thing. But I think from what I saw at Atlanta, maybe a little bit more work could be done, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, and I enjoyed what I saw.
I don't really have too much to add to that. I think they pretty much hit the nail on the head. But one thing I will throw in is that Atlanta is still a very special track and a very unique track with the track surface. So I don't know. You know, obviously going to Vegas, we're going to have the air ducts, which will change the racing even further. But even in general, I don't know if we use this package again at a well, I'll call it a normally paved mile and a half. But Atlanta's a rough surface and kind of throwing the cars all over the place and forcing drivers to really still just stay up on the wheel, having to drive the car all the way through the corner. Even with the added downforce, probably could have been a big factor in producing good racing.
Again, yeah, the type of racing is going to change. I know there's one thing we didn't touch is I think maybe Jay, you added it, was talking about lap cars. And we'll kind of transition to our pit stop segment discussion because apparently people were complaining about lap cars with this package. If you want to maybe talk a little bit more about that and maybe why drivers were complaining about that and what was actually going on track.
Oh yeah, so I was one of the ones complaining about it myself because I noticed, especially with the leaders, is they would come up on a lap car and then it seemed like they would just be all in their way. You would have lap cars racing 2 and 3 wide and the leaders coming up on them and have nowhere to go. Or even when it was one lap car, they would just run the line the leader's running and not get out of the way, or simply the leader just couldn't get past them. Maybe the package made it hard for them to get past. I really have no idea. And then I also noticed that even and then I even noticed in the mid pack, when the drivers are already a lap down and they shouldn't really be fighting for it anymore, I noticed people back in like 7th, 8th, 9th going past a slower car. They even struggled to get past them. So it could be lap cars just not moving out of the way, or it could be the package makes it hard to get by them. I really don't know.
Yeah, to put them that far back, I definitely don't think we expected that. Obviously, I think NASCAR's expectation is that they'd be all grouped up and they wouldn't have that issue. I mean, it could be an issue. I mean, I see it as, it's part of the race. You had to deal with lap down cars, but I think NASCAR is the only motorsport out there to where they don't really penalize for being a lap down car in the way. If you look at Formula One, they will penalize you if you don't let the leaders go by you. And NASCAR is just kind of one of those rare motorsports where it's not really a rule. So, yeah, maybe the package is preventing leaders to pass, or make their passing on lap cars much harder than in the past. We'll kind of see how that goes. That is definitely something we should look towards. And that transitions us to the pit stop segment because, Mr. Crybaby Truex, if you want to call him that now, was a little salty after finishing second at Atlanta. And, this is going to be interesting. 30 seconds to see whether or not you want to blame it on lap down cars, you want to blame it on maybe lack of car handling, speed. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say, but this is our pit stops segment. You guys will have 30 seconds each to answer this question, your own opinion. And Andrew, do we have that timer?
I'm pulling it up. Okay, yep.
Well, Andrew will have the timer. We will let the guests start with this. Let's give it up to Gary Owen. We'll let him start it off. So again,
on YouTube.
Gary Owen on YouTube. The pit stop segment. Should Truex really be salty after finishing second in Atlanta? Go ahead and start.
I think he should be salty for finishing second because it's his job to win and bring home the trophy for his team. But I don't think he should be salty with the lap traffic. He wasn't the only one dealing with it. Keselowski dealt with it and got by them, and Truex had an opportunity at the end within the last 5 laps to try and find a way around the 2, and he couldn't do it. So I think he's just being a crybaby, like you said at the beginning there.
All right. That's Gary's. Was that even close to 30 seconds? There's the 30 seconds.
There was.
All right, Jay, you're next. Should Truex really be salty after finishing second in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, he could be upset that he finished second because he came, right there on Keselowski on winning. But I don't know if he should be that upset at the lap car or not, because it could be down to the package. And he also certainly, at least in my opinion, did not have the best car. So when he was, saying that he was upset because the best car did not win, I don't feel that he had the best car. So I think he was wrong there. But was that 30 seconds already?
That was 30 seconds.
Oh, yes. When he's talking about the best car not winning, he must have been talking about Blaney.
There it is.
You mean Larson?
Or anyone for that fact.
Sure.
Larson was fast in the short to medium run. I felt.
Let's put it this
In the long
way:
run,
he was not
died.
talking about his own car, or at least he shouldn't have been.
Yeah. Andrew, your thoughts on it?
Okay, so personally, I didn't see his actual post-race interview because I was kind of multitasking at the end of the race. But from what I could tell, just from watching the race itself, I really don't think that was anybody but Brad's race to lose once the other Penske cars had to pit. Once Brad got out to that lead, I think he just slowed down to preserve the tires. I don't think Martin really truly had a chance. I think the only reason that he got as close as he did was because Brad was playing it safe. So I don't really think there's anything for him to be upset about. He should just take the good points day.
You may not need the timer for me because I'm going to be quick with this. Last time I checked, with like 5 to 7 to go, there's no in between Brad or Truex. I'm going to say it's all Truex's fault. He can be hard all he wants, blame all he wants. He wasn't able to get to the front. Brad was quicker, got there to the lead, won the race. Truex definitely wasn't the fastest car, but he should be happy that he was able to finish second in a car that hasn't necessarily been in the top 10 all season long with Daniel Suarez. And that is your pit stop segment from the Bump and Run podcast. For the second half of the show, let's talk about. There we go. See, you didn't need that.
I just left it going because it timed out really well.
Oh, I see. That's fine.
One quick note I want to just say on that, though. Like, even if there was lap traffic at the end that got in Truex's way, the lap traffic gave literally everybody trouble. And you didn't really hear that many people complaining about it. They just kind of accepted it and moved on. Yeah. So I really don't think you should have blamed it.
It's a part of NASCAR. You know, you have to deal with the lap traffic. It's just, they're going to be in the way. You have to know how to, work. It's just like working your way up, through the field if you're passing other cars. It's a part of how NASCAR works. It's like that, back in the old days. You had a lot of really slow cars and lapping cars constantly. It's not like you're going to fix every car being slow. It's just a part of the game. Let's talk about Las Vegas, because we are coming up to Las Vegas this weekend. A part of the West Coast swing, I should hope. Las Vegas, Phoenix, and then Auto Club, or in some order like that. People talked about this. People said that we aren't going to really get a full feel for the package until we go to Las Vegas, because that's where we saw the test. And obviously this package has the full aero ducts on it as well. I don't really know how to start with this. Gary, I guess the first question is, will we see a difference from Atlanta? I guess the definite answer is maybe a yes, but what are your thoughts on what we might see at Las Vegas?
Well, first, I do think there's a pretty good chance we're going to see a difference. I think, kind of like Daniel Suarez said earlier from testing, that it's more of a mix between Xfinity Series racing and the Charlotte All-Star Race package we had last season. So I think that there's a good chance that the field's going to be even closer. Probably not as close as we saw at the All-Star Race last season, but I think it's certainly going to be closer than we had at Atlanta. So you might see, even more intense racing in the midfield, and maybe even more cars up there up front battling for the lead. And that's really what I'm hoping to see, and I think we will see that.
Andrew, what do you think?
Man, I don't know. I just think, I don't know. I'm kind of convinced it might be harder to pass, and I don't know why I have that feeling. Because is that what the whole point of the air ducts are? Is to make the cars suck up better in the draft and make them pass better?
Watching the Xfinity race at Indianapolis, they explain the air ducts in some way as getting a better suck up onto the car. Or like when you moved out from the draft, and got fresh air, like you wouldn't slow down necessarily a ton. Or at least that's the theory of the aero ducts. I could probably look that up now and see, but go ahead and continue.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm still kind of convinced that Atlanta's track surface really helped with making better racing, because it usually kind of did anyways, even before the package change. So I don't really know. I don't know how different it's going to be. It may be a fantastic race. It may not. It may not go so well. I have no idea. I'm not going to go into it with a negative outlook, assuming it's going to be bad, because I really just don't know what to expect. Because even with the testing and things like that, that's half the number of cars, and everything will change with more cars on the track. So I really have no idea.
It's the same as Daytona Speed Weeks. You had 20 cars out there for the Clash and the Duels, and everyone was, afraid of their lives because they thought, the 500 was going to be bad, but it wasn't. And so I guess you can compare the two in that, although it is a completely different animal with the packages and the type of tracks. But, you could be right. We only really saw, 15, 18 cars in that Las Vegas test, and it wasn't every car in the field, so... yeah, who knows if we'll see the same thing we saw in the test or not. Jay, I know you're just not getting back. Your thoughts on what you think we might see with the full package going into Las Vegas?
I think we'll see something kind of like we saw at Indy last year in Xfinity, where they were in a pack, but you couldn't really pass the leader. You kind of had to, either work at it for a few laps, or you had to get a big shove to get past the leader. So other than that, I don't really know what to expect. I just think that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to be much harder to pass the leader than everyone thinks, or at least that NASCAR wants. I think you can make passes midfield, but you won't really be able to pass the leader that easily.
It was definite.
And testing kind of showed that.
Yeah, testing did
one thing
show
I just
that,
thought of.
and even Atlanta did.
I was thinking about, you think about Indy too, how they sucked up really good, but they couldn't pass the leader. I wonder if Vegas, kind of being a multi-groove track, is going to help with that. Because I don't really know if that's going to be affected by the fact that the cars are going... they're going faster in the corners, so I would think that they still have the opportunity to run multiple grooves with that kind of speed in the corners. So I kind of wonder if they get stalled out, if they can move up a groove or start running against the wall to get a better run off of the corner. And
it's not as
kind of the multi-groove tracks will help with that.
As Indy.
Yeah, because Indy's one groove and that's it, really, for the most part. So I don't know, that might help it too.
Yeah. I failed to call it in last week's podcast. I thought we were going to see the big one at Atlanta. And if it didn't happen in Atlanta, then it's going to happen at Las Vegas. Something tells me that the field's going to be way packed together for a really long time. These restarts we saw at Atlanta, I think majority... I know not all the restarts were, but majority of the restarts we saw 4 wide. Just because Atlanta is wide, but people were going aggressive going 4 wide. And Las Vegas isn't that wide of a track, but I can see a lot of 3 wide action going on. There's been 3 wide in the past at restarts, but after seeing the package at Atlanta, I feel like restarts are going to get even more hectic. And I'm just afraid we're going to have a big wreck, and it's going to take out a bunch of cars. Again, keep in mind that the aero ducts were not introduced at Atlanta because NASCAR new drivers were going to drag brakes at Atlanta. I was even questioning this myself. How did NASCAR, the drivers, know they were going to drag the brakes if they had never tested this package before? Yes, I guess it makes sense for them to run quicker in the corners, but on paper, I feel like this package, you wouldn't need to use the brakes at all. And we saw that Atlanta. So with their confidence that they don't need to run brake ducts and just worry about aero ducts to the front of these cars, that no one's going to be using the brakes at all. And if there is, there's maybe coasting, but I feel like it's going to be packed the entire time, which is what I'm afraid about. Even though every NASCAR fan out there says, "Oh, we want to see close racing, we want to see side by side," I feel like it's going to go too far. I could just see bad things going on with so much speed especially through the corners. Obviously, we've seen in Atlanta here where drivers were going like 20 miles over the average of what they normally run in the corners, 20 or 30 miles an hour. I could see the same thing for Las Vegas. And even Las Vegas is a fast track. With the previous package, drivers were hitting what? Like at least 205 going into turn 1 or something ridiculous like that. So... And they were
Around
at least
200, yeah.
Yeah, and then they were at least slowing down to maybe 160 in the corners. So I can see them doing 180 through the corners then, if you take that 20 mile per hour difference. So if they're doing 180 around Las Vegas, that's going to be scary in my opinion. I'm not sure if I want to see that or not. Because, yeah, I mean, it's shown in Atlanta that it seems like the speed kind of averages out throughout the track. And I know Las Vegas is a really fast track, and I'm just afraid that, you know, my concern is just there's going to be too much pack racing. It's going to be too hectic, and it's going to feel like a super speedway race, not in the fact of excitement, but in the fact of you're worried they're all going to crash, and when is the big crash going to happen? So, yeah, I mean, I'm still calling it. Like I said, I got it wrong in our podcast last week for Atlanta, but I'm thinking that's still going to be a thing. I mean, we saw, again, I'm going to bring it up again, we saw in the All-Star race in 2018 where they went 4 wide on accident going into turn 3, and it caused the big one at an intermediate track. And I am not looking forward to seeing a big one at any other tracks like this. So we'll see.
Chaffe got on the radio at Atlanta and said that if they got any crazier, it was about to turn into Wreck City. So,
Yeah, on the restarts, it was insane. But I think that at Vegas, in 3 and 4, and then the front straightaway is probably going to be the crazy hectic spots, because you'll get the run down the back straightaway, and then 3 and 4 is such a wide corner compared to 1 and 2. You can run probably 3 and 4 wide in 3 and 4 there, and then you get onto the front straightaway, and you know everybody likes to use the aprons. So you'll probably have people either fighting for the apron or making moves down onto the apron, going 3 and 4 wide. And so I feel like that's where you'll see the crazy passes and the crazy moves, and maybe even where the wrecks start. If it's not off the restarts, it'll be off of somebody making a move like that.
And I'll definitely be surprised if... I don't know if I would be surprised or not if it isn't a pack race. Atlanta wasn't. Atlanta was kind of like a normal Atlanta race where it was spread out, but it wasn't too spread out. But, you know, I'd be surprised if Las Vegas turns that way too, because in my mind, with a newer surface, a grippier surface, the speeds that they carry, I can't imagine it being as spread out as what Atlanta was. And, you know, again, Atlanta wasn't that bad, but, you know, it's just something we had to keep in mind going into it. To be truthful, that's my opinion. That's what I'm thinking. We, again, won't know. We will not know until we see these cars on track for practice this week, until we see them qualify and see their speeds, and, you know, we won't know until Sunday.
If it weren't for the testing, I would agree with you saying that we don't really know, but sure, we won't know with 40 cars, but I really do think that at the very least we'll have a 15-20 car pack kind of racing around Las Vegas, 2 and 3 wide possibly, and because I don't think with the addition of another 20 or so cars that you'll get that spread out. I think they're still going to have some kind of pack, whether it be 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 cars all in one big pack. So, I mean, I think we'll see one. Just how many cars are in the pack, that we don't know. But I think we will see a pack race, and it'll most likely be the whole race in a pack.
You think we'll see a big one?
I think we will.
Probably, yeah.
I mean,
I don't, personally.
So why do you think that?
Well, I feel, like I said earlier, I feel like it's not going to be as condensed as we saw in the All-Star race. So I feel like it's still it's going to be a little more spread out than what we had. I think Jay is probably right. There still could be a little bit of a 10 to 15 car pack in there, but I think everyone's going to be a little more in line. And Matt, you mentioned earlier about the restarts, how, I mean, they're going to be going like 3 and maybe even 4 wide at Las Vegas, which could be one of the things that ignite a big one. But I think the real place you have to worry about something like that is a track like Auto Club, considering how wide that track is. I think that's where you're going to really see a pack race.
Old bumpy surface as well there at Auto Club.
They're going to be going 5, maybe even 6 wide at a track like that on restarts if they can.
Auto
And
Club
that's
could be
gonna
the
be
track where you
dangerous.
have a pack running 4 wide for 5 or 6 laps, and it's just 4 wide, 9 rows deep, and it's absolutely insane. And then all of a sudden, boom, everybody's
That
dead.
and Michigan are the two tracks that are going to be.
It's like someone
insane.
turned the hacks on for NR 2003 or something like that. And then I don't know if Gary, if you said that, or Jay, you said that. There's something like someone made a comment that this package is going to be a mix between the All-Star package and Xfinity package, and that threw me off in my thinking.
Gary.
Like, I never thought of it that way. I felt like the package was very similar, very close to the All-Star package. And yeah, true, it's not exactly like it, but even for me, I feel like the Xfinity package doesn't have that much grip or downforce either. They've been taking away a lot of downforce in those cars as well. They've really reduced both the spoiler size and the weight. They don't have that huge bulky hunk of spoiler that like the Cup cars had in 2012. They're now down to that single one that like the Cup Series uses, and I think those Xfinity cars, yeah, they're a little bit easier to drive, but they're not as easy as they maybe were like a handful of years ago. So that was really interesting to hear. I'm curious to see if we will see like kind of an in-between between that All-Star package and the Las Vegas test.
I was gonna add in. I feel like you could also throw in the mix there that it could also look like truck races, because if you think about it, the trucks at most tracks, they're full throttle and they're high downforce, and they're not always in a pack, but you see them get kind of rely on the draft and kind of pack race a little bit, at least for 5 or 6 laps after the restart. So I think you could kind of throw that in there too, that it might look like a mix of truck racing as well.
The last thing, as I'm losing my voice here at the end of the Bump and Run podcast, I have to I don't know what's the word here, really hate on the NASCAR community. You're all stupid. Let's put it that way. Everyone in the NASCAR community, you are stupid. Unless you think like us, then maybe I'll forgive you. But other than that, you're all stupid. I'm not afraid to put this out there. I'll say it one more time. You're all stupid. I'm reading through social media comments and remarks. And after Kyle Busch made his comment about, oh, the package is no talent, or, oh, you're holding it full throttle. Everyone in either YouTube comments or Instagram comments are going, this package requires no talent. They're full throttle. We want to see the drivers struggle and, really, figure out the handling of their cars and just drive these things raw. Guys, we've had that package for 3 years and everyone complained there wasn't enough racing. Can we just put it out there that NASCAR is trying to help you guys see excitement on the track? Yet as soon as one thing pops up, everyone gets mad at NASCAR. My question to you guys, how far should NASCAR truly listen to the fans? Everyone talks about that. I've seen every commentator, every retired race car driver. I see present race car drivers, present crew members, crew chiefs. They say we need to listen to the fans. I think like 85% of the fan base is stupid. They're just going to throw random things out there. I never know. I wake up one day, they're thinking one thing. I wake up the other day, they're thinking another thing. Should NASCAR truly continue to listen to the fans?
I think they have to listen to the fans because they need to bring what the fans want. But the problem is the fans are always changing their minds. I mean, you got all
fans
the fans
are also not the drivers.
Yeah, I mean, they were like, oh, we want, close quarters racing, we want big packs, and you got fans that were like, oh, we want what we had back in the day, because it apparently was amazing when everyone was spread out. They were probably drunk in the grandstands, that's why they thought it was so good. But
Oh boy.
then they got the ones like right now that want the close quarters racing, and then what Kyle Busch says, what he said, and now they're all angry that it takes no talent. I mean, I don't really care. I think if you're racing a car at over 150 mile an hour, no matter what, it's going to take some talent. But I think
we see what happened to Kyle Busch.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I was
no
gonna
talent
talk
and he
about
wrecks in
that.
practice. But I mean, they need to listen to them because they have to still bring in an element of what the majority of the fans want, but they need to be careful with listening to, because what you said, man. I mean, the NASCAR fan, I mean, they don't seem to be the brightest sports fans out there. I like what NASCAR is at least trying to do with the surveys and whatnot, and what they want with schedule changes and the racing. I mean, they've been asking a lot of questions, and hopefully they continue to do that. But yeah, I think that they, like I said earlier, they have to listen to them, but they need to be careful when doing it.
Jay, you said you were going to bring up Kyle Busch, so you go ahead and talk about that, and then talk about your thoughts.
To what Gary said, Kyle Busch was complaining about how this package is going to take no skill, and you could throw somebody who's never driven a race car before out there, and they could win a race. And yet he goes out there and practice. I can't remember which practice it was, but he goes out there and immediately spins out the first time they use this package. I honestly laughed out loud when that happened because I'm thinking, you are stupid. You said it takes no talent, and you go out there, and in my opinion, he's one of the most talented guys in NASCAR.
Oh, hands
and
down,
he spins out,
down.
can't control the car. And I thought that was hilarious. And it also showed this weekend that you have to have control of your car. You can get loose. You have to have the right setup. So it still matters to have your car set up right, and it still matters to know how to drive a car and not just go out there and run full throttle. You have to know what you're doing. So I think, like with most things, it has to be a mix. NASCAR has to somewhat listen to see what the fans want, but they also can't take everything the fans want, and they also have to listen to what the drivers want, but they also can't take everything the drivers want. So maybe they can take something that the fans say they want, take it to the drivers and see what their opinion is on it, and if they hate it, maybe give it to them, because, going off of, I think it was either Bill France Sr. or Jr. said, if the drivers hate it, then it's good for racing, because the drivers are going to want whatever is easiest for them to drive and whatever makes... Maybe now it's different. Maybe now the drivers want something that's hard to drive and they can show off their talent and all that stuff. But anyways... so I think you have to find some kind of good mix of where it makes the fans happy, but also you still get to keep the talented drivers in the series. You get to make good racing and, just put on the show that NASCAR is trying to put on, but also have it be competitive.
I think the unfortunate reality of this entire situation is that NASCAR has to listen to the fans to some degree, whether they want to or not, whether the drivers want them to or not. I mean, like we've touched on Kyle Busch obviously right now, or we are talking about him right now. In my opinion, Kyle Busch is the most talented driver of his generation, like hands down. I don't really like Kyle Busch, but I think he's the most talented driver of his generation. And regardless of what comments he made, when you have the most talented driver, or at least one of the most talented drivers, go out and wreck the car in practice, there's obviously some level of difficulty. And I think that fans misconstrue on throttle time to just mean that the cars are easy to drive, because like I said, this package punishes mistakes, and although there is more on throttle time, the drivers have to make sure that they are not making any mistakes and maximize that on throttle time, because they will get passed, they will fall back, and they will have a bad race if they keep making mistakes and have to get off the gas. It's just, it takes a level of skill, but it's just a completely different kind of racing than what they're used to. But, I mean, it's just kind of like what you said. Sometimes people just need to shut up because they complain about literally everything. The race is good, they complain about it. The race is bad, they complain about it. Their favorite driver wins, they'll still probably complain about it. I've seen somebody on Twitter, I'm not going to say the account name or anything like that, seen somebody on Twitter in like the middle of stage 2 say that they were bored to death of the Atlanta race and they did not like it, and I quote, "It was too easy for the cars to pass."
And yeah,
who says that?
And it goes into, and it goes straight into, obviously NASCAR's listening to probably that same fan base. I mean, this is the biggest package change we've seen since them changed generation cars. Like, I mean, this again, yeah, the biggest package like within a generation, where they went all out to try to get what the fans wanted. And here is probably that same exact fan base, who was asking for it, and they're still complaining in the NASCAR's faces. Like, what's the point now? Like, I don't...
it's just a double negative. Like,
I don't see any meaning
their talent, and there's a bigger skill gap, a bigger separation, so they complain that the racing is boring, or the racing is exciting because the skill gap is slightly narrowed.
And you
they complain because the drivers can't show off.
You obviously can't read. You obviously can't use your eyes. You obviously can't comprehend that this Atlanta race was at least more exciting than previous Atlanta races. At least we didn't know who the winner would really be. I mean, it was a mix. There's so many different storylines. It was crazy. Now, it doesn't mean it needs to be side by side, but there was a lot of different action that we've seen. It wasn't Kevin Harvick pulling away and getting the win in Atlanta. It wasn't some other driver pulling away and getting the win. It was different, but yet, because, you know, there's one thing in particular that the fans don't like, they have to go on and whine and complain about it. And that's
and even though the racing is closer, the drivers with the most talent still found their way to the front at some point during that race.
Oh, yes, for sure.
They still did.
Also,
Kevin Harvick, Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, Brad Keselowski, the reigning series champion Joey Logano found their way to the front during that race because they are good drivers. So, like, I don't know how you can say it's too easy for the cars to pass as if there's no skill involved. I think NASCAR has to look at Daytona, realize that they sold it out, there's still a beacon of hope in the fan base of people that are interested in their sport, and take every single positive thing out of this first race and out of this package and capitalize on it. Because people are going to complain no matter what, but you have to kind of go with what the majority wants or what the majority thinks. But I truly think after Atlanta that the majority of people thought that Atlanta was a good race.
Well, I was going to mention something else real quick that we forgot to bring up. NASCAR not only brought in this package because of what fans wanted and all this other stuff, they also brought it in to please the teams, the OEMs, and possibly bring in new manufacturers to the sport. Yeah. They talked about reducing it down to 550 horsepower would reduce costs and possibly make other manufacturers be interested and say, hey, look, we can build an engine for this sport, we can build a car for this sport, let's go get in it and see what happens. And then, you know, so that's another reason why they went with this package, is to try and bring some new things to the sport and, you know, for the overall health of the sport, not just to please the fans.
And that's a very good point, too, because obviously Dodge is talking with NASCAR. It's been a rumor, and I think everyone does want to see Dodge come back. You know, and I bet there's other manufacturers. I'd love to see other foreign manufacturers join in. It's not going to happen unless...
You just made some fans mad?
I probably did make some fans mad. I mean, hey, we already got Toyota in here, and half of these Fords and Chevys are not made in America. But you have to be able to be open in a motorsport world like this. I mean, you look at Formula One, they're losing teams like nothing. It's rare for them to gain teams, and it's much easier for new manufacturers to join, like Formula E or, you know, any other division. You can't really say much about Formula 2 or Formula 3 because I think it's mainly like stock Dallara chassis with like a engine or something. I don't know what it is. But it's hard. It's hard to get to the top and make something work because you almost have to start from scratch unless you really get help from a team who, you know, knows how to do these things. You know, if you have one maybe engine manufacturer, one chassis manufacturer, you know, who can, you know, get their stuff out on track and be competitive, you know, you need to be able to compete. And yeah, definitely with the direction they're taking with this package, of course it's going to help them. And I think, you know, it's definitely a great package. So you're right. This package wasn't necessarily for the fans. A little bit was, but yeah, it's to aid in, you know, new manufacturers and whatnot. To end the podcast, I have two questions for everyone here. Really quickly, obviously, our definition of racing has changed. How I see racing is not what someone else sees racing. What I've seen in the past is different than what we see today. My question is, because obviously people wanted this package to have a lot of side-by-side racing, a lot of battling. You know, instead of this, you know, single-file bore fest, even though I never thought of it as a bore fest, but people just wanted to see more action. So the two questions are, have we lost our meaning of what racing is, and is our modern fan base only attracted to action? Gary, I want to start with you. What are your thoughts on those two questions?
For the meaning of racing, I mean, you can say, I guess that we have lost it. I mean, really, the meaning of racing, actually, I heard Tony Stewart touch on the same topic on the Dale Jr. download last week when I listened, and I kind of agree with him. Really, the meaning of racing is just to be, the first guy to the finish line. That's all it is. It's not about having to have an insanely exciting race to accomplish that, which is what the fans now want. So I would certainly say that, yeah, we've kind of lost it, and it's unfortunate, but maybe it could be fortunate for us because we're going to get more exciting racing out of it. And the modern fan base being only attracted to action, I would say, is 100% correct. I mean, you see the attention spans of fans drop insanely when we don't have exciting races happening. I mean, the ratings have gone down quite a bit in the past few years, and we certainly haven't had very good races in the past years, and obviously that's why NASCAR is having to make some changes. And I mean, it expands out of the sport into other sports. Ratings are dropping because other sports aren't maybe producing the action that people want, so the attention spans drop. And it's certainly 100% the modern fan base is majorly attracted to having action.
I'll agree with Gary on the meaning of racing. That's true. The meaning of racing is to be the first guy across the finish line at the end. How you get there in the middle isn't necessarily defined, but I do think that the fans nowadays are 100% there for action. And I know I can say that if I wasn't already a diehard NASCAR fan, I probably wouldn't watch half the races either, because I can find something else better to do with my time. I don't want to sit there and watch 40 cars go around single file for 400 laps and, nobody makes a pass and anything like that. So I can see why it's driven for excitement, because, you want to watch something that's exciting and that has passing and has, storylines and headlines and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'm even kind of the ones that wants it to be exciting, but I'm still going to watch even if it's not. But, I think NASCAR has to find some way to get that middle ground of, what's exciting but also is still considered racing, and not just, kind of what they're starting to create now, which is just ride around and hope you can pass.
I think they're attracted to whining. I don't know either way. It's kind of what I said earlier. Either the fans want, and the drivers both want a package where drivers can show off their individual talent, but then the field gets more spread out, especially if the best drivers are in the best cars. And it's a boring race, and people are upset because every week is, single file boring racing. Or you have kind of what we have now, where the fast drivers, the better drivers, can still find their way to the front, but there's still a large potential to have a bad day because there's less of a skill gap just to the natural, kind of the nature of this package. And so then people are happy with the closer racing, but they're mad because, if they root for who they think is the best driver and they're not up front, then they kind of get mad about it and blame it on the package. So I think it's kind of just give and take for both sides there. As for kind of losing the meaning of racing, maybe. I just think it still depends on the fans. I think we're kind of moving into a new generation of fans. And I kind of think that the fan base, along with NASCAR, is kind of in a transitional period where we have a little kind of bit of new fans, a lot of old fans, and they're kind of maybe even clashing personalities in the fan base, which is why there's kind of mixed reactions about everything. So I think again, we talked about it last week, I think once we get Gen 7 on the track, that's going to kind of be NASCAR's do or die. Are we giving the fans what they want? Are we still going in the right direction? That's kind of where they're going to have to draw the line, as to where they have to decide what is right for the sport. But I think if people can kind of hold out for another year or two, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, go on, Jay.
If NASCAR gets to Gen 7 and they don't start to see a ratings increase, and then I think that's where everybody should kind of be like, oh crap, this is not good. Yeah. Because I think right now they're still trying to find where they want to be, and by Gen 7, they probably need to have that figured out. If they don't, it may be bad for the sport.
I definitely agree, Andrew, with your comment on, it's the transition in fan base. And I think it's just the fault of not that tradition of what NASCAR is as a whole has just kind of been lost. Sure, I understand people will go back to old races and look, there's action, but the action wasn't necessarily side by side racing all the time. And it goes back to, the comments that Mike Helton said that we talked about in episode 2, where you can't bring back old things to make it new and exciting. You have to branch out and try different things. And I think that's what Gen 7 is. And, we'll definitely talk about that in our 2021 podcast when there is an off week for the Cup Series. Definitely talk about, what can we expect out of the Gen 7 car and what can we expect out of racing. But it's just that weird transitional period with the fan base. You have so many people who are traditional race fans, and then you have the people who are maybe new NASCAR fans within the past few years, because they've seen the advertisement and they've seen NASCAR reach out to try to grab new fans. And so now you have this clash. You have this clash of what NASCAR wants to hear from the new people, but necessarily they don't hear from the traditional fans. I mean, it can go either way. My definition of racing has always been, it doesn't matter what the on-track action is like. It's about strategy and getting yourself in position for the end. I mean, it's just like a track and field event for like a school or anything like that. Maybe sometimes it isn't that exciting. There's a lot of competitions out there that aren't exciting at all, but there's still a lot of strategy. There's a lot of thinking. There's a lot of skill to get yourself out there at the end. And we shouldn't be complaining about the on-track action. We should be congratulating the person who won the race for playing the right strategy, for making the right calls, for putting themselves out there at the end to grab the win. That's the whole point of it. It doesn't need to be the on-track action. I mean, look at Formula One. I love Formula One. It doesn't have side-by-side racing all the time. I mean, when there is, it's cool, but it doesn't need to be. There's a lot of strategies at play between like Ferrari and Mercedes on when are they going to do pit stops, the driver lineups. Obviously, those change. This year, you have a bunch of young guns coming up in F1. You have a lot of different teams, There's more to racing than just the on-track, production, and what we get from it. It's about outside of racing and the small things that happen during a race and things that happen throughout the week. I mean, you gotta remember it's a full-time job for a lot of these people to go to the race shop for SHR, JGR, Hendrick, Penske, all these teams. It's a day job for them to work on these cars, even a night job maybe for some teams. They probably have some night shifts to where they need to get these cars ready for the race weekend. Heck, they're going to the West Coast for the next coming weekends. They got to have these cars prepared ahead of time so they can drive them all the way to the West Coast, because most of these teams are coming from Charlotte. There's more to racing than just the on-track production. And I think the majority of the NASCAR fan community forgets that. And all they want to do is run their mouth and complain, and they don't see the whole picture. Maybe it is something about age. Maybe it is something about getting older that maybe you see that. But even for me, as still being kind of like a young fan, I don't understand why we're, growing up to, seeing action this, action that. And that's a part of, the community in the world in general. And everyone's social life, it's just about action, quick things happening, so obviously if it's not going to attract anyone's attention, it's not going to be impactful in any way. So should NASCAR follow along with what they say? Yeah, otherwise they would lose the fan base, but are we listening to the right fan base or not? And that's, again, what I saw with comments about the package having no talent. I joke about it a lot too, the quote-unquote no talent package. And what NASCAR was trying to produce. It's NASCAR just can't say, okay, teams, you're going to do this, and this is what your cars are going to do. A lot of money was invested to try to figure out if this is going to be, going to work. A lot of teams have to invest in this stuff. So there's a lot of money going around, and I think it's disappointing that with all this work, the fans are still, whining and running their mouths. And I mean, it's just a disappointment. It really is. I mean, will it improve over the season? Who knows? I mean, we've only gotten done with 2 races. The racing could still change because, like we talked about with our Las Vegas preview, we don't know what we're going to see at Las Vegas. It's kind of up in the air. So we'll definitely talk more about it. And I think this is our longest episode so far, but a lot of good stuff.
Wait. It's important.
What? Oh, no.
We have to end on a positive note. We can't end on all this negativity.
What's the positive, Andrew?
There's a rumor going around
Oh, no. What's the rumor?
that Mr. Beast, you know, the guy on YouTube that spends money on cool stuff.
Oh, Lord.
So supposedly it's on the entry list. He's going to sponsor Josh Ryume. Ryume.
It's either Ryume or
He's going to sponsor
name.
Josh Ryume at Las Vegas and put sub to PewDiePie on a NASCAR.
Whoa.
What's a NASCAR?
That's huge.
So that's gonna happen.
That's
on a
huge.
stock car.
Okay, that's a good positive. I did not know
Yeah,
that
somebody
was
took a
happening.
screenshot of the entry list. So it's the number 33 Toyota truck. So in the truck race, watch out for the sub to PewDiePie truck.
Watch him win. Wow.
That would be great. David Land is convinced it will help the auto racing segment in the YouTube algorithm.
There it is. It might. It might. You never know. So, Andrew, thank you for ending us on a good note. And that will be it from us here on episode 3 of the Bump and Run podcast. Jay and Gary, thank you for joining us. Andrew, it's always been a pleasure. And be sure to subscribe to Gary Owen on YouTube for quote-unquote quality NASCAR Heat 3 career mode content. Quality. Yeah, go subscribe to him. That'll be it from us. Hope everyone watches Las Vegas this weekend, and we will be back next week with episode 4 of the Bump and Run podcast.
Bye.